This podcast episode features Dr. Steven Pinker, the Johnstone Professor of Psychology at Harvard University and a leading thinker on the mind, language, and societal progress. Throughout the episode, Pinker explores a vast range of topics centered on the nature of truth, common knowledge, truth-seeking institutions, free speech, the challenges of cancel culture, and his firmly held scientific materialist worldview. At the heart of Pinker's discussion is the notion of common knowledge, a recursive state where not only do individuals know a fact, but they know that others know it, and they know that others know that they know it, continuing ad infinitum. While intellectually complex, Pinker emphasizes that human beings intuitively grasp this concept in daily life, as it forms the foundation for coordinated action. Whether it's simply meeting a friend at a cafe or driving on the right side of the road, common knowledge ensures that individuals align their expectations and behaviors. Without achieving this layered mutual awareness, cooperation breaks down. Pinker illustrates this with examples that span from simple social interactions to the functioning of money as a social construct. Paper currency holds value precisely because everyone knows that everyone else accepts it as such. Common knowledge thus creates the invisible glue that binds social relationships, from friendships to hierarchical structures in organizations. Pinker also highlights how people manage the boundaries of common knowledge by selectively making certain things public or keeping them private through euphemism and innuendo, thereby controlling social dynamics. One of the podcast's central themes is the phenomenon of cancel culture, which Pinker describes as a modern-day equivalent of historical public punishments like hangings and stocks, facilitated now by social media's viral platforms. He recounts the infamous case of Justine Sacco, whose ill-advised joke exploded into a career-ending public shaming episode before her plane touched down. Pinker argues that social media amplifies natural human tendencies toward punitive social policing by making public shaming instantaneous and far-reaching. This mechanism, however, contributes to a toxic environment where people are incentivized to punish norm violators visibly to reaffirm and prop up social morals. Pinker explains this as a psychological urge tied to the maintenance of common knowledge about social norms. When one person openly breaches a norm, others react publicly to signal shared enforcement. While this may serve societal cohesion in some cases, Pinker warns it stifles free inquiry and honest debate, freezing social discourse under fear of backlash and career destruction. Pinker is deeply concerned with the erosion of objective truth, especially in a political climate where truth is treated as subjective or tribal property. He highlights how figures like President Trump introduced the dangerous idea of "I hold truth," undermining trust in journalists and scientists indiscriminately. This strategy floods the informational landscape with competing and contradictory versions of reality, sowing confusion and cynicism. The consequence of this is an opening for authoritarian figures, whom Hannah Arendt warned about, to impose their preferred truth, without challenge, because the very framework of verifying truth has been nullified. Pinker stresses that when the public no longer respects credible institutions, science, journalism, academia, there is no common factual ground to contest misleading narratives. This growing relativism endangers democratic discourse and rational policymaking. The episode explores the crises of trust that scientific institutions face, often accelerated by accusations of wokeness or political correctness compromising objectivity. Pinker acknowledges the imperfections in science. Mistakes happen, knowledge evolves, but firmly maintains that the scientific method offers the best path toward truth. He warns that undermining scientific credibility fuels anti-intellectualism and irrationality, giving rise to conspiracy theories and unscientific cures. He cites claims that significant portions of medical literature or textbooks are false, but puts these in perspective by contrasting them with the overwhelming prevalence of false information outside scientific consensus. Pinker advocates for transparency, acknowledgement of fallibility, and openness within science, qualities that can restore public faith. He condemns attempts to politicize science, emphasizing that science must strive to be apolitical, focusing strictly on evidence and reason. The conversation delves into the subtleties of social interaction, including the use of politeness, indirectness, and the challenges faced by individuals on the autism spectrum. Pinker provides an insightful explanation of theory of mind, the ability to understand what others think and feel, which is central to social harmony and communication. He illustrates how politeness often arises from the need to recognize and respect others' mental states. Through examples ranging from innocent requests, masked as indirect hints, to complex social dances, such as flirtation or bribery, Pinker shows how recursive mentalizing is fundamental to navigating relationships. For individuals with impaired mentalizing ability, such as some on the autism spectrum, the nuances of etiquette and indirect speech may be confusing or frustrating. This area underscores the profound role that shared cognitive frameworks play in everyday social life. Social media surfaces repeatedly as a double-edged sword, serving both as a novel facilitator of common knowledge, but also a breeding ground for polarization and cancel culture. Pinker notes that the speed and reach of social media rounds intensify public shaming, but also fragment the public into ideological bubbles where distinct common knowledge develops within isolated groups. This fragmentation challenges the notion of a unified public discourse. Though there still exists overlap in factual belief for many, increasing negative polarization drives communities apart, painting political opponents as evil or stupid. Pinker stresses that social media platforms unwittingly enable tribalism and division, complicating efforts to rebuild shared understanding or consensus on critical issues. In the context of free speech, Pinker offers a robust defense of the American First Amendment and its protections against government censorship, including hate speech. He articulates the dangers inherent in criminalizing speech based on perceived offense, which can be weaponized to silence dissent or unpopular opinions. Pinker stresses the importance of distinguishing between speech that incites immediate unlawful action, which may justifiably be restricted, and broader expression of controversial or distasteful views, which should be protected. He points to recent examples from the UK and Russia, where vague or expansive laws have been used to arrest individuals for social media posts or even holding blank signs, a symbolic act intended to broadcast suppressed dissent. Pinker underscores that autocratic regimes fear common knowledge arising from public expressions and demonstrations because it fundamentally threatens their control, highlighting why free speech and assembly are pillars of democracy. Pinker comments on the increasing political polarization and negative affect polarizations that afflict many societies, including the United States. Extreme factions not only disagree on policy, but demonize each other's motives and beliefs, deepening social mistrust. He acknowledges that while most people remain moderate, social media and partisan media amplify extreme voices, fostering distrust even towards science and facts. This breakdown of shared reality complicates democratic decision-making by preventing consensus on empirical truths and the best courses of action. Pinker notes that conspiracy theories have long been a feature of human societies and currently flourish due to the erosion of trust and perceived lack of authoritative truth sources. Countering polarization requires recommitting to shared norms and objective evidence. A distinguishing feature of Pinker's worldview is his strict scientific materialism, rejecting supernatural explanations and paranormal phenomena such as ESP or mystical consciousness. He dismisses anecdotal or fringe claims, including government remote viewing programs, as lacking replicable evidence and inconsistent with the known laws of physics and biology. Pinker argues that extraordinary claims require extraordinary evidence and that the absence of such support justifies skepticism. He openly challenges the existence of consciousness beyond brain activity or any post-mortem survival, emphasizing that science remains the most reliable method to investigate phenomena. For Pinker, human progress emerges from understanding natural mechanisms rather than invoking unverifiable mystical forces. Despite his materialism, Pinker acknowledges that spirituality and religious belief can have measurable psychological benefits. He references research suggesting that spiritual practices may reduce depression and foster mental resilience, though he attributes this to specific brain and behavioral mechanisms rather than supernatural causes. Placebo effects, mindfulness, meditation, and community belonging are plausible explanations for these positive health outcomes. He proposes that while beliefs can be delusions objectively false, if they improve well-being without causing harm, there is an ethical case for tolerating them. However, Pinker warns against allowing such beliefs to interfere with necessary medical care or to justify harmful acts, drawing a boundary between beneficial personal faith and socially detrimental ideology. Finally, Pinker voices concern about recent political attacks on universities, including defunding and censorship, tied to perceptions of ideological bias or anti-Semitism. Using Harvard as a case study, he condemns efforts to weaponize accusations as pretexts for undermining scientific research and intellectual inquiry. Pinker stresses the critical role of academia in driving societal progress through rigorous scholarship and innovation. He affirms the necessity of preserving academic freedom and resisting pressures to conform politically, which threaten the integrity and credibility of institutions that produce knowledge. Although acknowledging some challenges within academic cultures, Pinker maintains that universities remain vital bulwarks against misinformation and authoritarianism.